Hi guys, it's Blair here, and I know I haven't made a video in a really long time. Been going through some self-development. Today, I really want to tackle the fundamentals of my own perspective and my own story around sex. So I want to do a couple of videos, maybe some blog posts, really discussing this and opening a dialogue, because I just finished reading The Art of Sleeping Alone by Sophie Fontanelle, a memoir, Why One French Woman Suddenly Gave Up Sex. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about my thoughts of the book, except to say that the questions that were asked really brought some stuff up for me. It triggered some stuff. Especially her personality, it left a lot to be desired, but it also offered me some chances to see the mirror within the author herself and really start asking some questions. For me, community is a very important thing, and so is opening a dialogue and having conversation with people about sex, sexuality, identity, spirituality, everything that's interconnected together. I am not one of the people who can just sort of sit down and not have an opinion on it, because I do have an opinion. And sex itself has definitely been a very, very strong and pivotal movement in my life. Not for the simple fact of having a relationship and having sex, but how sex actually, I use sex to navigate through my life up until this point. So, if you would like to check out my review, I will leave it below. It's on Goodreads. I think that if you are interested in the questions posed in this book, definitely check it out. If you have trouble with passive authors who don't really dig deep and they just sort of scratch the surface, you may have issues with it. But it's only 150 pages, so I was glad I read it, because it really actually opened up something inside of me that really needed to be expressed. I have some notes, so I'll be reading off the screen. So that's, if I sort of look at the screen, that's what I'm doing. So, I just want to start by saying that I am aware this is a large scope topic, and many different paths I will explore in this topic and in this series of videos, but this is a lifetime exploration. Sex is not the all-encompassing exploration, but it is part of it, and I am very, very passionate about understanding it as I've lived through it and as other people have lived through it, and making it vocal, making it a thing, making it, I mean, I know it's a thing, but what am I trying to say? Making it an active conversation rather than a passive conversation. So today, like I said, I was inspired by reading The Art of Sleeping Alone, and I wanted to address my own perspectives and share my experiences on the importance of sex, and to pose the questions to some of you to consider. So, I want to say this is my experience and my perspective. However, I want to start a dialogue, like I said. I want to be able to express myself, express my experience in a very true and uncut, raw way, so that someone out there may identify with this story, someone might identify with these feelings and emotions, and be able to actually sort of conjure something up inside of themselves and start to question these things. Okay. So since I am just going to be talking about my personal story today, I'm going to pose some questions at the end. I do have a huge list of things that I want to talk about, so I'll go with over a couple of days at the end. So, my story basically starts as I was born. My family does have a history of sexual abuse, and issues revolving around sexual identity and the likes. I didn't know this until I was an adult, and I definitely didn't address my own issues until I was an adult. So my story is, I first had sex when I was 8, and I had sexual experiences with several of my friends, female, and like I said, I was 8. So I stopped doing that when I was about 9, and then I moved into adulthood, and the first sexual relationship I had with a male was 18. I was 18 and he was 34. Now, I really rushed into both experiences very naively. I didn't really understand the world or the scope of what I was getting myself into. there's lots of layers, and I know that this is many a woman's story, as well as it is a man's. But from a woman's perspective, I know this is many a woman's story, especially when you're sort of discovering your sexuality. Up until the point of 18, I did have some sexuality confusion. I came out, or actually was outed at school, but I was in myself a lesbian until probably about, I think I was 16, and then I discovered that I did like males, and I had some issues where I was living and who I was living with, who sort of conjured up the sort of confusion around this as well. So for me, I made some choices. I made active choices, and I think this is something really important, and I want to sort of put out there that for a very long time, especially around my sexual identity and just my sex life, I felt withdrawn and as if things were happening to me. It's only really recently that I've actually started to uncover and really accepted myself that I had a part in everything I did, everything I chose to do, every part of my sexual identity and every part of the sexual landscape that I explored was part and parcel with somebody else, but also with me, and I made active choices. Now, when I was around 18, I did have a situation where I was in an abusive relationship. So that really kind of propelled me towards more abusive relationships, but it also offered paths for me to explore my own sexuality, my own identity, but also power, divinity, femininity, submission and domination, the relationship between male and female and female and female, because at that time I was still very much interested in both sexes, and I still am to this day. Before that period, I was in a place where I wasn't able to express myself properly, and I was systematically shut down for a whole range of reasons. So coming into my sexual life as an adult, I was angry. I was so full of anger, confusion. I'd experienced my first relationship of control and sort of the power struggles that people go through, and I didn't really have much self-worth back then. I didn't care. I was immortal. In my own eyes, I was immortal, and using sex was a way for me to kind of explore the landscape of life and death and people, and for me, definitely, it was a way for me to push boundaries, to understand myself and kind of dig deeper, but I never would dig deeper. I would always rise along the surface. And my sexual identity went from there, so I ended up having relationships with many people. I discovered that through these relationships that I'm polyamorous, which means that I can have multiple partners at the same time, romantic or platonic, sexual or non-sexual, doesn't really matter. I just am a person who wants to show openly love and being intimate and exploring other people and having that opportunity to do so, and so is my partner, so we kind of work together. We went through that journey together, but that's a different story. Now, in between that period of 18 to now, I was involved in a lot of things, and I let sex guide me. I let sex sort of show me the paths to go down, and I always had options, guys. I always had options. I just took whatever was fueling that anger, whatever was fueling that projection, whatever was fueling that darkness inside me that I could not understand. I chose down that path, and I walked down that path. So I got involved in the BDSM community and scenes, and I got involved in the sex industry, both online and offline. For me, it's been very challenging to accept that I have been part of these communities, both because I love the experiences I've had, and I've also had some very traumatic experiences which kind of resulted in abuse as well. Because again, the same reasons, the same patterns kept coming back in my life. What happened was, when I left those identities behind, and I left those circumstances and communities behind, I was left with a mess. I was left with a mess of confusion. I was left with a mess of a lack of identity, a lack of personality. But I still had my personality, but I had no idea how sex was going to be important in my life. I knew that I loved it. Most people do. I knew that it was an important part of my sacred divinity and femininity, that my sexuality wasn't just based around having sex with a man or a woman. It was much more deeper than that, much more complex, and I had that sort of feeling for a long time, but I denied it. A lot of people talk about how our bodies speak to us, and I truly believe that. Part and parcel of the way that I sort of let myself disintegrate physically and mentally was by not listening to the body signals, not listening to my gut instincts, not honing into my intuition. I shut down everything. And I use sex as a beacon, as my lighthouse, as my torch. I speak about Hecate as being one of my strongest goddesses for teaching me to be my own light and my own path as well, and for shining the light on my crossroads and anything that comes up, especially with dark goddess work. Sex is essentially, for me, a part of this kind of work. It is about integration. It is about learning my opposites. It's about learning the paths that I went down and explored, and what lessons I learned from that. I think it's very important, especially if you are coming out of a cycle, because it was a cycle of anger, it was a cycle of abuse, it was a cycle of not understanding family dynamics either. So the stuff that was going on underneath that, I won't go into too much family detail, just because personally I haven't asked permission to do that, and it's not my personal experience to share. But definitely some things were going on that just really reflected that sex is this pivotal chain in my family generational link. So from that, I really wanted to understand myself. I wanted to understand my family. And I also wanted to understand how I could take what I had gone through, take my experiences, take what choices I made, and use them to propel myself forward. But not only that, to reach out to people as well, and to explore this, because I have had those different perspectives. I have been inside and outside different areas of sex and the sex industry, and sort of, questioning intimacy and things like that. So I've broadened my perspective on that a lot, and delved into all the little nooks and crannies that are possibly out there. So from that, I just sort of hit a road, I hit a block, I hit a wall, and I started to really look at my relationships, but primarily I started to really look at myself and what was navigating me. I realized that every decision that I made was based off my desire to please others and to please myself, because I wasn't able to address issues that needed to be addressed. Sex was a scapegoat for me, and I'll talk about that in another video, but definitely it was a scapegoat, and up until this point I definitely used it. I used it to every capability. I used it to propel myself, I used it to aggrandise myself, is that the word? I used it to be a person I didn't want to be, and I used it as a way to not really connect with people. Now, you think sex is all about connecting with people, and it is, but there are some parts of me that would use it to not, especially when it came to, admittedly, I had a DS dynamic, and I've always had a DS dynamic. If you're not aware, submission, domination, pretty much expanded or kind of just thrown way off the deep end with 50 Shades of Grey kind of crap. There is some core stuff in that. There is some truth to the level of power play and stuff like that involved. And I didn't realise back then that sex was so important to me. That sex was important because it not only showed me who I was personally, but it also allowed me to accept other people. It also showed me who other people are. In their moments of vulnerability, in their moments of passion, in their moments of fear and love and light. it showed me their shadows and allowed me to be sharing my shadows. And I think the important thing that I've noticed now is that I was practicing my shadow work with other people. You know, I'd see their darkness and they'd see mine, but we didn't have language for it. I didn't have the language to express what I was feeling back then. So I think it's really important to understand that sex is more than sex. It's more than bodies together. And it depends on your personality, it depends on your upbringing, it depends on everything, your beliefs, morals, whatnot. For me, sex is important. For me, having sex is important. To being a sexual being, a sexual spiritual being, is important. Now, whether I would be able to live my life without having any sex again, that's questionable, and it's interesting because it brought up this book brought up those questions. Now, for me, I want to explore that too. I want to explore that in another video, but for what my personal experience has been too, is that what sex also did, or what happened to me through having these sexual experiences and having this sex bubble, living my life basically through sex. That was all I did. It was my obsession in an unhealthy manner. Now it's kind of like a really passionate area that I'm wanting to explore. I think it's one of my life purposes, my paths to share with people. What was reflected in The Art of Sleeping was a part of me that is still sort of lingering, but I've definitely struggled with, is men. My relationship with men, the connection with men, the idea of a man, the idea of sex with a man, the idea of sexuality with a man, the idea of aggression, abuse, but also on the other spectrum, interconnectedness, spiritual connection, integration, being a lot more, self-aware man, mindful man. All this sort of got thrown up in the air when I started to look at this stuff. And I started to realise, when I read that book as well, that I had a hatred. But not only a hatred for men, I also had internalised some misogynistic crap that I picked up from other people as well. And I kind of wondered myself whether it was my stuff or other people's stuff, and it worked out, that I'd had relationships with women as well that were kind of dysfunctional. I hate to use that word, let's take that word back, but they were not healthy. There was a lot of, unconscious shit going on. Two people coming together, unable to navigate and unable to communicate. And I realised how much hate I had inside me, and how I was using sex as a way to propel that hate, to just seed that hate, to seed little hatred, little baby seeds of hatred out. And I own that now. I own that. I mean, I went through some stuff. It caused a lot of mental confusion. I had PTSD. I still have strings of PTSD, which I'm healing. A lot of stuff I went through that I was involved in did eventuate as traumatic experiences, did eventuate and skew my perception of what sex is and how important it is, and how important sexuality is to men and women, and the differences and the similarities, because we are at base humans. We are at base have the same drives. We may not have the same chemical reaction, hormonal reaction, same lives, same history, same interest. That is why we are here, to explore this with each other. But fundamentally, I think there's a really strong rift, and that's where this is not a topic in itself, but I felt that rift inside me. So all through my life, that's been my journey to understanding the rift, to loving people. I love people. I truly love people. I'm fascinated by people, sometimes to some extremes. And sex is definitely a way for me to question those curiosities. Now for me, my life is about understanding my shadows, understanding the darkness in me, understanding my interests and passions, understanding the scope of them, and understanding the spectrum of them, understanding just who I am and how sex is part of my identity rather than a suppression, and how it can both pull you forward and enlighten you and also shut you down and offer a place for you to scapegoat, pretty much, which has been my experience. So that is a little bit about my story. I know it's 20 minutes long and a bit rambly. So the question I want to pose to you today is, how important is sex to you? Just fundamentally, the first thing that comes to your head, how important is sex to you and why? Make some notes, just jot them down. You can do a video response, you can do whatever you like, you can even just sort of think about it after watching the video. From here on, I'm going to be talking about a lot of these issues that come up. Some of the topics that I really want to talk about is sexual identity, intent and context. What does a sexist life look like? Empowerment through sexual expression. And how important is sex to live a fulfilled life, and is it necessary? And what is a healthy sexual life? Because all these kind of questions come up and they're very personal. So I'm going to be sharing my perspectives on my own life and try not to broaden that too much to the point where I'm being judgmental, because human beings can be like that. But I'm just going to be honest and share what my thoughts are and open dialogue. Sorry, drinking tea. So thank you for watching, thank you for listening, thank you for making it all the way through this video. I don't know who's going to find it, where they're going to find it, but this is just me putting it out there, sort of exploring my own path, sharing my own journey, and making it an important note that you are responsible for yourself, and you need to own what happens to you. You need to own your sex, you need to own your sexuality, in whatever way that means to you. Own it and take self-responsibility, because if you don't, you do end up being a victim. And from a personal perspective, where I have lived many years being a victim and coming out the other side and understanding and loving and appreciating the experiences I had, even though they were traumatizing, it is very integral that you own and act with responsibility around yourself. So thank you guys for watching. I love you all. I'm going to be making some different videos too. I'm really in the mood to make some more videos. And I can't wait to speak to you all again. Bye.